Good Lord, He done blessed us with another hot fall, ain't He? It's gonna carry on through. I can tell. Get off there. Step there. Oh, thank good for Western Kentucky snuff. That's better. I reckon I'll never know whether it is a blessing or a curse to grow old. But oh, how I long for them exciting days of my youth and them wonderful early days of this here state that we all call Kentucky. Oh, how I long for the smell of the deep woods before all the log barons come in here and cut it. How I wish for the feel of that fog like it used to gather on my forehead whilst I was paddling quietly along in the canoe right up here in the river. I reckon I even missed that feeling of panic after I couldn't run from old Virginia, knowing that I had killed Willie Leachman. Now people, they always are telling me, Simon Kenton, you're a rambling old fool. Yeah, I know now. I oftentimes talk in circles. They tell me that I'm a-losing my memory. But now I'll promise you, if Julians will prod me a little bit, I'll finish each and every story that I get started. Now, I didn't care much for schooling as a lad. It seemed like all my old head would think about was a roaming the woods or a paddling the rivers in a canoe or a cutting bee trees or maybe even a shooting them tree rats that we all call squirrels, such like that. Oh, but I'm here to tell you my lack for a formal education, it sure cost me in later years. Well, I tweren't much good to my family neither. Oh, I hated the drudgery of farm life, and they'd always put me to splitting rails, or they'd put me to hoeing in the corn patch, or packing rocks out to new plowed ground, or such like that. I gotta tell you, I reckon I was just about 15 when I fell in love with her. Ellen Cummings. Oh, what a beauty. Oh, what I thought. I'm here to tell you, she is the first thing in my life that brought about the same feelings as a mama bear running me through the bushes after I had been a-messing with her cubs. Oh, but I'm here to tell you, it didn't take long to figure out that woman was surely more dangerous than there is she-bear. And pain. Oh, and grief. It killed me. It killed me when she married him. Willie Leachman, that is. But I just couldn't help it. I had to call him out. And call him out at their wedding, I did. Oh, and he whooped me. Whooped me soundly, and why, hit us in front of what seemed like everybody in Fauquier County, Virginia. But now, it tweren't long for I healed up. Good tools, they is rare in them days, and my pa, he'd sent me over to White Rock Ridge to borrow a felling saw from the Leachmans, and it just happened to be laying way back over on a ridge there where they had been a-logging, and lo and behold, if they didn't send me an old will to go and fetch it. Why, no sooner than we got in the woods there a piece, I proposed that we settle our old score in the fighting. Oh, hit a zone. Now, I need to back up here a little bit and tell you that, now, since that day of my whooping, I'd been a whole lot more willing to work. I'd split me a lot more rails, and I'd put the oomph into hoeing that corn. Pack me a terrible lot more rocks out the new plowed ground. Why, the bigger uns, the better. Why, the word was about the town there that believe that Leachman boy has done knocked some sense into old Simon Kenton's thick Irish skull. Little did every one of them have a notion that hit us all in anticipation of this here very day. Well, I sure had overrated my new pyre. Oh, and he proceeded to thrash me again. Hit us awful. He was wiring the ground out with me, and I knew I had to do something, and I looked over, and not too far away there's a sapling. It had a fork on it about that high off in the ground, and the thought had occurred to me if I could ever get his long chew of hair and get it wrapped around that bush, well, the day it'd be mine. So, well, I dug my heels in and I shoved us that away. And I didn't hardly get it. So I just reached around here and I bit him. Hey, and that got it. And I got his hair and I got it around that bush. And with all the pent-up fury that had built in me, I commenced a beating on him. all human mercy and sanity, all it had left me. I reckon there in a little while I realized how rough I had been on him, and I commenced to trying to roust him about, and he just laid there limping. He turned to breathing when I left him, and I knew I'd killed him. All I could think about was an old feller coming to our house there, and he used to say things to aggravate me, and he'd always say, "Young'un, anybody that's got as many moles on their neck as you do is surely gonna hang." And I was done a feeling that noose. It is a tightening around my neck. So at the young age of 16 years and 7 days, I left my home. I left my family. I didn't tell nary a soul. And I lit out and I headed west. I traveled all night. I made her all the way to Ashby's Gap of the Blue Ridge. I always hear her tell it is 18 miles. I remember as the sun is coming up there, I took me a long langer and looked back down through the holler there towards our home place, and I swear I could still see our little old cabin, though it looked not larger than a thimble. I sure was in a quandary. I didn't know what to do, where to go. But now, thoughts of my old rambling Uncle Tom Kenton kept a-creeping into my head. Now, Uncle Tom, he is an Indian trader. And he used to come to our cabin there when I was a young'un, and he'd tell tales. Exciting tales. Familiar tales. Tales about a land to be found on the lower Ohio. Now, Uncle Tom was a blow. And you had to take what he said with a grain of salt, you know. But he said it is a fertile land. He said there that the beans grew taller than the trees. He said that the grass that hit us so tall it'd tickle your belly when you walked through it. He said there's critters like you'd never seen before. Why, buffaloes, so many, they jar the earth enough to make the teeth shake in your mouth. Why, deers and elks by the thousands. Big fat bars by the hundreds. He said the birds are so plentiful that when they flew over, they darkened the sky. Wolves and coons and beavers and minks and otters, you name it. He said the wildcats is bigger than a hound. Squirrels was thicker than mites on a hen. He said the turkeys was everywhere. And fish. He said he'd never seen such waters for fish. Big uns, head to tail in every creek. My Uncle Tom, he called it the middle ground, for it laid betwixt the Cumberland River and the Ohio. My plan was made. I was going to go there and bury my identity forever. I remember being so cold. I ain't have nothing on much. No hat, no coat, and nary a shoe. Next day there, I had managed to make her fur enough away from home. But I fell in with some fellers that was a clearing new ground, and I did manage to beg one of them out of a hat. Nary one of them offered me nothing to eat. And I was just too feared to let them know how hungry I really was, lest I was to be held in suspicion of running from something. Oh, but the next day, I come up on a cabin there where a woman was a-baking hoe cakes. Oh, they smelt good. I'd smelt their scent a long way off, and I swear I followed that scent like a hound on a track right up to her door. She barred her door against me. Reckon I probably did look like a haint, but you know, I put on my bestest of charm. It weren't long before I managed to beg her out of a pound of her cornbread. Here's the first I did in 3 days. I ain't never been too proud of this, but it is 5 days into my plight. I stopped by a cabin there to beg something to eat, and why, just in conversation, I happened to learn the name of a distant neighbor about a day's journey on west. Presented myself there the next day under their very own last name. It caused so much excitement about the possibility of us being kinfolk. Not only did they feed me better than I did since I'd left home, they gave me a pair of used shoes and another shirt, a whole lot better than the old blood-stained one I had on. This time I gathered particulars about another family, about another day's journey on west, and again the next day presented myself there under their family name. I'm here to tell you, this here little plan, it worked wonderful. I claimed kin of most everybody in between Ashby's Gap and Warm Springs, Virginia. Night after night, I sat by friendly fires and I told stories about my family back east and speculated on my journey west. In just a little while, my young life, it sure had become high adventure. "15 days after my fight with Willie Leachman, I strolled into Warm Springs, Virginia. It is just a little better than 140 miles away from my home. Now, at my last stop, I'd learned of a wealthy gentleman there. His name was Butler. He is a miller and a widower, had no children. I'd heard he was doing his best to run his mill by himself, and I sure was hoping that he might be willing to hire a young man that would work hard, and of course, cause he is wealthy, he'd pay me good for my labors. I had no trouble of finding Jacob Butler's mill, but I sure was nervous about talking to him. I took me a stand out behind a huge oak tree, and I rehearsed what I was going to say to him. Good evening, sir. Oh, I mustered up my best of King's English in the finest of posture. Good evening, sir. My name is Simon Butler. Simon Butler. Little did I know that this time I'd keep my stolen name for a little better than the next 9 years. Oh, Butler, we become great friends. And now Butler, he is Irish himself, and I got to tell you, there's few things in the world that he valued more than kinfolk. And oh, he talked so awful proud about one uncle, Sir Toby Butler, back in dear old Ireland. And of course, I just casually mentioned while as a young'un, I'd heard that name many times. He's immediately certain we as kinfolk, hired me on the spot. Oh, but work? Hain't never worked this hard. Hadn't before, and I hain't since. Why, he put me to packing huge poke sacks of corn and then meal after it had been ground there. And I was loading them wagons. Them big Conestoga ones they had wheels on them that high. And oh, I done a lot of long needed repairs to the mill dam that helped the water back that powered the huge old water wheel that made this whole gum operate. Oh, Butler, it is a wrenching affair leaving him. Oh, it affected me a lot worse than I ever figured it would. But Warm Springs, there it is always a bustle, activity. And I stayed scared to death. Somebody gonna come through there and see me for who I really was. And well, I couldn't believe it when he reached up above the door and he took down a fine flintlock rifle and he handed it to me. He said he wanted me to have it. Said that it had been given to him by an old friend from Lancaster, Virginia. Said he just hoped it'd help me make my way back to Warm Springs, safe and sound. Oh, it is a beautiful rifle. Had about a 4-foot barrel and a striped maple stock right out to its muzzle end, and had a silver star laid right down in the wood on its cheek piece, and on the fur side there had a pretty brass box with a daisy flower right on the end of it. And why, so taken with this here generous gift that I promptly named it Jacob, for a knowing that in the days to come this here rifle, it is gonna stand by me, help me, and protect me as the old miller had done himself. Well, all the activity about there, it sure had me awful excited, but I was awful disappointed that I wasn't finding no fellers to find that was heading into the middle ground, and I figured I'd just best go on north to Fort Pitt, the very mouth of the mighty Ohio. So surely there I'd find me some fellers heading towards the middle ground. And now I didn't make it too far at all, for I run into a couple of real interesting characters. George Yeager. Oh, he is a great tall feller. I always called him the Long Dutchman. Another feller by the name of Strader. Now his given name is George too, and oh, me and old Strader, we sat for days listening to that old Dutchman tell tales. Oh, exciting tales, familiar tales, tales about a land to be found on the lower Ohio River. He said they was cane brakes, vast fields of cane, far as the eye could see. Most all of it more than twice my height. And now the old Dutchman, he'd been kidnapped as a baby by the Indians, and he told us tales about him and the Indians. They'd set back in them there cane brakes out around salt licks where old boggy, salty water it'd bubble up out the ground, and the critters, the bufflers and the elks, they'd come there and they'd lick the salt out the ground. And oh, he said that they was vast roads. Why, lots of them 40 feet wide and thigh deep, but had been plotted down by centuries of travel by these here beasts. And these here roads zigzagged all over this here promised land from one salt lick to another. The Dutchman called it Kentucky. Oh, I knew it had to be my Uncle Tom's middle ground. Bufflers. Now, you'uns has heard me talk of bufflers, but how many of you'ns has ever seen one? Oh, they odd-looking critters. They got huge heads that they carry weight down here, close to the ground, right up in front of great woolly shoulders. And they got little black horns that jut out of either side of their head, right up above little beady black eyes that peer out at you from under great shaggy eyebrows. Oh, and it is great sport to down one of these sure beasts. But now you had to be awful careful in a place and you shot in order to bring one of them to the ground. Oh, I remember the Bledsoe brothers. They was telling tales upon the t'other, and one said, "Brother shot him a buffler twixt the eyes." Ball fell off. Flattened it did. Never hurt the old buffler at all. He shook his old woolly head and he wandered on off. But now my brother, he fetched that there ball, chawed it back round, and used it again to kill him a deer. That just goes to show you how thick a skull them woolly boogers had. Ha! Not to mention how precious that lead was. Old buffalo meat hit us good too. Well, I ain't had a bite of it in years. Come think of it, I ain't heard of a buffalo being in these here parts for years. But now I like the tongue the best. But now the steaks that we cut off and its hump and down on its shoulders, all there's enough to make you risk your life to down one of them. But we'd jerk the rest of the meat. Meaning we'd cut her up in strips about that wide, and we'd make us a rack out in the middle of the sun there. And we'd build a fire up under it using the green limbs off a hickory tree, and oh, it'd last forever after you had done this to it. Well, that is as long as you can keep her dry, you know, and keep her in a poke sack or something, you know, where the flies wouldn't blow on it. We'd tan their hides too. We used their brains Injuns said that every critter had just enough brains to tan its own hide. But they is right, too. Now, the leather off an old deer or an elk, why, all they made for good moccasins or leggings. And I reckon if you was in a pinch, you could make you a shirt. But now, Mrs. Ann McGinty, she done talked her man into hauling the parts in here to make her a loom and a spinning wheel. And she'd figured out how she could take linen cloth and go this away, and wool and go this away. And she made her a cloth that she called it Lindsay Woolsey. Oh, now that's what I wanted my clothing made out of. I'm here as witness. They ain't nothing colder and clammier in the wintertime, or hotter and sweatier in the summertime than a leather clothing. Well, there's a day in my life I'll remember like it is yesterday, until they laid me into this cold ground. It was the 30th of May of 1780. I didn't know whether to be amused or disgusted. It is 1,000 wonders more fellers didn't get themselves killed to coming in here trying to settle this here territory. There's 8 of them. They'd beached their canoes right up above the 3 islands on the Ohio, right up above Louisville, Kentucky. Oh, it is obvious that they is new to this here territory. Why, the fire hit us way too big, and the wood they is a burning hit us way too green. One of my greatest pleasures in life has always been a leading folks across this here great state of Kentucky, wherever they wanted to go, and to try to teach them enough by the time I got them there to where they could at least keep their hair. Oh, these fellers, I'd seen their smoke for over a mile, and nary a one of them had a clue that anything was about them. I had to laugh right out loud at the awful start that it gave them when I hollered out, "Hello there!" and they all jumped. They told me they hail from Virginia. Said they was looking to settle in one of the new towns they'd heard about. Told them I'd take them wherever they wanted to go. Oh, but one of these fellers, he looked awful familiar. I finally caught him a wee bit detached off from the rest, and I sauntered over and I struck up conversation with him, and I told him, I said, "Hey feller, where are you from?" He said, "Fauquier County." Better than that, off a Bull Run mountain, very place of my birth. Well, it was with only the greatest of inward calm that I mustered up the strength to quiz him there. And I said, "Hey, feller, I was through that very part of the countryside one time, and the whole ridge there, it is in an awful uproar about a young feller by the name of Kenton, a killing another by the name of Letcher," something like that. He went to laughing at me. He said I had her backwards. Said the name was Leachman, Willie Leachman. And it is he who killed Simon Kenton. Oh, it is as if I'd been kicked betwixt the eyes by a mule. He said that Leachman had been tried for murder, but they had to let him go because they couldn't find Kenton's body. this Kenton. I said, you knew him? Knew him. He said, he's my brother. Oh, I knew right then and there it had to be my baby brother, John. And oh, I just couldn't talk long enough and fast enough. And why, the next morning there, why, we still a talking. There's the sun coming up and the slobbers is coming out of either side of her mouth. And why, it is so good to find out that everybody at home was still alive and they're doing okay. And now, it is about 3 years before I made it, but I started right then and there planning me a trip back home. Why, I even brought them all back. Even old Willie Leachman, I gave him 40 acres of ground. Oh, but he is a pitiful soul. And Ellen, she died giving birth to their first child. And he'd spent the last 9 years of his life with everybody thinking he'd killed me. I ain't never forgive myself for it. Reckon I never will. Oh, took religion when I was 63 years old. Praise the Lord. You know, it didn't really change me much. Now, I'd asked for forgiveness way back yonder for all the lying that I'd done to try to save my neck. You know, when I thought I'd killed old Willie Leachman. But I reckon about the most evident change in me was a laying up the rifle gun for the first time since old Jacob Butler had handed me my first. And then having this old habit of always carrying something in my hand, I made myself this here old walking stick. And just like that old rusty rifle gun, I carry it with me every waking hour and keep her pretty close to the hand even when I'm asleep. Oh, it makes for a good poker. And why, if somebody gets fresh with me when I'm out here walking, I reckon I could whoop them if I needed to. Oh, I reckon I'll tell you, most humiliating thing in my life was getting thrown in jail. Now, in them days, that is prior to 1778, all in the world a feller had to do to claim him a tract of ground was to blaze it with his tomahawk. You know, cut the bark on the trees out and around it, or live on it for a year, or prove you'd raised you a corn patch on it. And it don't take no imagination. Why, the land speculators and the pioneers is coming down this river up here thicker than hair on a dog's back. It's said that in the early days of the court systems of Kentucky, that it is literally shangled with double and triple land claim cases. In such a case as this come up twixt me and Andrew McConnell. Had a station up here where Lexington's at now. Me and Betsy and the young'uns, we'd done moved across a river. Champaign County, Ohio territory. I done got fed up with the crooks a coming down the river. And Boone, he'd been through. I know he sent that speculator to me because he ain't been gone over 10 days. Feller come through, just happened to have a tract of ground belonging to old Daniel Boone. Of course, I bought it. Me and Betsy and the young'uns going west, Missouri. McConnell caught wind of it. Sent his lawyer to demand payment from me. Well, I wasn't about to pay him. This where my education failed me. I didn't have enough sense to go to no courthouse and sign up for their property I'd claimed. And well, I wasn't about to pay no taxes. And Anyway, they ordered me held and seized till judgment could be made. Now here's where it gets funny. Champaign County, now it had been largely settled by friends and relatives, and I didn't have no jailer. Reckon what? Oh, they set him up a polling real quick like there. Elected me, Simon Kenton, jailer. I ain't had no jail neither. But oh boy, they built them a big one in just a little while. Big 2-story structure. They had them a nice sawmill there. It had 4 rooms for jailing downstairs and a parlor and 5 rooms upstairs for living quarters. And about 8 or 9 weeks, me and Betsy and the young'uns, well, we'd moved right in. Now I know I done a lot of lying to save my neck when I thought that I'd killed old Willie Leachman. But I will contend until the day I die that Simon Kenton is a just and honest man. Oh, and they weren't nothing. They weren't nothing gonna cause me to cross my bounds. Urbana there, it was the county seat, and it had something that they called town bounds, and if you could get somebody to sign your bond, you could roam at will as long as you didn't cross them bounds. Oh, and I weren't about to cross them. Oh, not even for the death of my little girl, Elizabeth. Oh, she is Pa's little girl. She is the only one of my young'uns I'd ever got any time with whilst they was growing up. And we never knew what killed her. It is just one of them childhood things. And we had her funeral downstairs there in the parlor, and I went with them right up to the edge of my bounds, but I wasn't about to cross them. Though everybody there urged me to. But I got to tell you, it is the saddest day of my life of watching that procession wend its way through the prairie to her grave. Oh, but the Lord giveth, and the Lord, He taketh away. It is about 12 months later. My Miss Betsy, she gave birth to us another little girl. And we too named her Elizabeth. Thus be the way of the Lord. Oh, long now after the Indians' warpath and the buffalo's trail have give way to these villages and city streets, I can't keep but to walk silent. Even a knowing that they ain't nothing but good neighbors are surrounding me. This here habit of being constantly alert and in fear, it ain't gonna be broken. No, I reckon I'll never know whether it is a blessing or a curse to grow old. But oh, how I long for the exciting days of my youth. And as this old sun sinks, as each one of my days they come to an end, I know I'm a-fighting the final battle. And I got to tell you, by far, it's the hardest battle of them all.
Stay safe, stay warm, stay free.